Okay, so today we're going to have a look at something called carbon footprint. There's a definition we need to know about this, and it's the amount of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases given out over the life cycle of a product or service. So, what we mean by the life cycle of a product, and we'll give some examples in a minute, are the extraction of the raw materials, so the things that make up our product or our service. Manufacture, which means making. The transport. And then finally, disposal. So all of these parts of the life cycle of a product or something that we do or a service could potentially release carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So let's actually have a look at an example. So if we think about a polythene or polyethylene bag, so a polyethylene carrier bag, the raw material for that actually comes from crude oil. So we've got to drill for the crude oil. We've got to heat it to fractionally distill it. So that process that we've come across before where we fractionally distill crude oil. We've got to heat the alkanes to crack them to make alkenes. We've got to use high temperatures to make the plastic or the polymers that make up polyethylene. And we've also then, once we've made our polymers, we've got to transport our to the shops. And then at the end of it, we've got to transport to waste sites. Once we've finished using the plastic bags, they've got to be transported either to a recycling centre or to an incinerator or to landfill. Now, every single one of these processes, parts of the process, uses energy. And any process that uses energy is going to potentially release carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And that's a really important point. So any process that involves energy or transport potentially releases carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases. So that's what we mean when we talk about the carbon footprint. We're actually talking about the fact that energy and transport process release carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So let's just have a quick review of some of these things because it's quite wordy. This and quite a few things that we've had to talk about. So our definition again here is that a carbon footprint is the amount of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases given out over the life cycle of a product or service. And though the life cycle includes getting the raw materials, making the product or carrying out the service, transport of the product, and then disposal of the product. And we've seen with polythene or polyethylene, so plastic bags, that all of these processes involve energy. And that if something involves energy, it's likely to release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And that is because almost all of our energy production still, or not almost all, but the majority of energy production around the world is as a result of burning fossil fuels. And that releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Also, transport is going to potentially release nitrogen oxides into the atmosphere as well. So this is obviously something that we need to try and reduce. Right. So we can use alternative energy production. So things like wind power, solar power, hydroelectric power. That's good and will eventually reduce carbon footprint, but actually building these in the first place in itself has a carbon footprint. We can do something called carbon capture. Now, carbon capture is where the carbon dioxide that's being produced by power stations is taken, not put straight into the atmosphere, but is taken and can be buried underground or pumped underground at pressure, and we basically get rid of it that way. We can do something called carbon offsetting. So a company could say, we're going to release X number of tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and that's our carbon footprint. So we will plant the equivalent number of trees that will reduce or absorb that carbon dioxide through photosynthesis. We can try and force people to use or governments can try and force people to use alternative sources or to reduce their use of something by carbon taxes. This is quite a controversial one, and something that would need to be thought about. And we can also use carbon neutral fuels. So this is a little bit like carbon offsetting in the fact that we use fuels that have been grown, for example, so sugar that can be sugar cane that can be turned into bioethanol or biofuels are carbon neutral fuels. Overall, they don't release any more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere than growing them takes in. So that really is largely everything that we need to have a look at about carbon footprint. So the key idea is that with carbon footprint is that it's to do with the amount of carbon dioxide that any activity or any product or any service that we use releases into the atmosphere. So how many greenhouse gases and carbon dioxide they do. You need to be able to know an example. Polythene here is a good example. And we need to know ways that reduce carbon footprint as well. Thank you very much.